They sat at the Club World Cup last year, this has been well documented, and said the setup and the makeup of the squad is wrong for what the Premier League is. He wanted direct attackers, much more fast attacks. They scored more fast and direct attacks this season than in any other under Pep Guardiola already, and we're only halfway through the season.
Arsenal and Manchester City are locked in a furious race for the Premier League title, and despite what many people may say, Aston Villa are definitely part of it too. However, lots of people have written the villains off already, despite that incredible winning run of theirs. So we have decided here on Tactics Exposed Team Talk to break down from a tactical perspective how we think the title race is going to go between Arsenal and Manchester City. I'm Will Pugh, that's SunSport's tactical guru, Dean Scoggins. So, Dino, what are we going to cover in this video?
Well, you know me, Will. I like it to be formulaic and formation and whatever, so we'll just go straight through. Defence, midfield, attack, who's got the edge and where the tactical battles can be won and lost in the second half of the season.
Exactly. So in this video, we'll be running through all of those elements, find out which team's approach in all of those parts are more sustainable, more reliant on players being fit. Obviously, as we get to the business end of the season, Dean, both of those teams are going to have loads of games to contend with, and at the end of it all, one of them will probably lift the title above their head, Dino, with all due respect to Aston Villa, of course.
Yeah, probably. I mean, it is a three-horse race at the moment, but I think as we get into February and March, we're going to see two teams who, with those squads that they've got, and obviously all of the European commitments and everything that go added with it, I think those two will be the ones where it's master versus apprentice right till the end.
Exactly that. Well, master versus apprentice, Pep Guardiola versus Mikel Arteta is exactly what it is. Let's start with the defence then, Dino. Just outline for us how both teams approach their defences, and then of course we'll give it a little bit of an evaluate after that.
Yeah, well, I think what we're talking about here across the whole thing is that you've got the best defence in the Premier League in Arsenal, and I don't think that's any secret, and it's also no accident. This has happened over 3 seasons, 4 seasons of Arteta's approach in making sure his first priority is that they don't get counter-attacked against. They're not at risk in transition, and that does frustrate a lot of Arsenal fans because it means often that they don't commit as many players forward in attack. But obviously, they've conceded 1 goal from a counter-attack this season. And what was it, 8 clean sheets on the bounce, or 8 clean sheets in 9 in the middle of the year. Absolutely fantastic. Obviously, very good goalkeeper. So
Back to George Graham football.
Yeah, a little bit. But let me just explain that, okay? So let's move a striker into that striking position. And often as I talk about, Arsenal work in teams of 3. So if they play down the right-hand side, which predominantly they do, they'll have a right back, a right 8, so an Odegaard and then Saka, and they work as a 3 down that side. And the same down the left, they operate in a 3. So if a left back's pushed on, that might be Calafiori. If there's an Eza coming off that left-hand side, and then the left 8 being Declan Rice.
Now, people might be looking at this going, hang on, Dino, you said this is the defence section, but you're talking this way, no doubt, because in most games Arsenal play, although they do have to defend, they have loads of the ball, so all their defensive actions usually come from them having the ball in the opponent's half and then losing it.
Precisely. They dominate possession. So if Zubimendi is in there, and then you have two centre-backs like that. So that shape there is very, very similar to what Arsenal will be in or will play in for the vast majority of games, because they do have most of the ball, they dominate possession through Odegaard, through Zubimendi, and then what will happen is teams will drop their players in here to obviously block that off. So the danger for Arsenal in these setups is when teams who park themselves like that, the danger is here and the danger is there. So that's why Arteta's rest defence we talk about is the best that there is. And it does frustrate Arsenal because what he doesn't want is 1v1 here and 1v1 here, and then these guys pushing in. That is bad news for Arteta. He will go absolutely berserk on the touchline. He'll be on the pitch, let alone outside the technical area. So that is where it doesn't work for Arsenal. So
why
often,
is that, sorry, mate? Why is that?
Because as soon as you're playing in Premier League, as soon as the ball gets won back in these areas here, which it does a lot, it's transitional phases, Premier League, right? Second balls and really physical, direct running now. If this player here was to win the ball back and make a bursting run like that, then just by there you are 3v2 against. And that's Arteta's worst nightmare. So he always makes sure that they have a rest defence of 3v2 at least. Often it's 4v2 because they'll be in that sort of position there. And then from an attacking perspective, that does cost them. But it means they're secure here. They get involved in a duel here. And then by the time that duel is won, then they're in that position there.
Yeah, and that central player there, Dino, of the three that you had, tends to be the midfielder with the two centre-backs being wider with these full-backs?
Because the two centre-backs are the ones that Arteta wants in the duels. So if then you have, when they're fit, Gabriel and Saliba going 1v1 against whoever that is, most of the time they're going to win those duels. They'll win 60-65% of their duels against a striker, very high proportion, which means then you've got a cover man there. And, then they've also got runners. Defensive runners, I mean. So Calafiori, one of the best recovery defensive runners. Declan Rice, probably the best defensive recovery runner. As soon as they lose possession, Arsenal, they are the fastest team to get shirts back in their own half. And that is something that Arteta's worked on the training ground for years. And it's no accident that they end up very, very quickly, when they lose possession, they very, very quickly end up like that. And even if a team commits 4 or 5 players forward, they've still got it, Arsenal. They still end up in that position there, and that's why they concede so few chances. Their XG against is less than half per game this season, and I don't really like XG, you know that. It's more, it's how teams take their chances. But if Arsenal concede, I think they've conceded over 30 less shots than the nearest competitor, Man City, this season. You concede less shots, you concede less quality chances, and you've got a great goalkeeper, and you've got two centre-backs who are great in duels, you're going to concede less goals, which means you have to score less to win.
Well, that sounds like George Graham football, if you ask me, Dino. But now, talk us through then what Man City do and how that's different.
Yeah, so Man City's very different. They do concede more chances, they do take more risks, but they do have more possession with their centre-backs as well. So we'll just move, obviously, Erling Haaland up. And then what Pep Guardiola, will come onto their attack in a moment, but Pep Guardiola wants them to form this very, very attacking front six. So they end up in a 3-1-6 shape, or a 2-2-5-1 shape, where then you've got Haaland at the front.
I tell you what, you come out with some new formations on Tactics Exposed.
Attacking shape, not formation, right? As these managers will always say, a formation is just a starting point for you to play with your tactics within.
What are you playing with this weekend? We're going with the old classic 2-2-5-1 again.
2-2-5-1. I mean, happy days. Go for it, lads. But yeah, so what that means, Pep Guardiola has coached this way for years, where, the pitch is a grid, and what he doesn't want is two players in the same grid.
Right.
Okay? Because if you have two players in the same grid, that means you can get two defenders over in the same part of the grid, and then you get crowded out, and it also leaves another area open up to go in the other direction. So they go off each other. So if a winger's wide, then the fullback goes into here. And this is what we've seen from Nico O'Reilly, okay? But defensively is what you wanted to ask me about. So what they'll do is, this season, they've done very differently, is push their fullbacks on. Okay, very, very high up the field, and that means that obviously the centre-backs aren't like in previous years. Gvardiol would go marauding forward, and they lost their shape very much. And this year, without Rodri, a lot of the time, Nico Gonzalez and then Bernardo Silva have been the two that have been in front. And you know what I say about Bernardo Silva, my favourite tactical player. Yep. You can go, absolutely unnoticed for so long, and it'll be, let's just say, Matheus Nunes has gone up the side, left his man there, Bernardo Silva will go, fine, that's okay, because I'm fulfilling that role, because Nunes is fulfilling that role, okay? So he does that all the time. So Man City, where you can get at them is in that area there. Because if then, we've seen it in games against Bournemouth, against Brighton, Tottenham at the Etihad, and early on in the season, is that you make them commit players forward, and then you can transfer that into attack. And if you're brave enough to be able to leave a player at Man City up the field, whether that's a striker striker or a winger, you can get joy. Obviously, that comes with risk. But that's why, generally speaking, Man City games are slightly more entertaining than Arsenal games this season, is because City will give you a chance at the back. But they're also been much more direct this season, City. So it's going from back to front much faster. And defensively, that's why they concede more chances. So, I mean, it's a no contest between the two teams. Who's the better defence?
Well, tell us then, Dino, before we move on to midfield.
Absolutely Arsenal. And, you know, I think you'd be hard pushed to pick one Manchester City player in the Arsenal back five. Yeah. And probably Diaz gets in there for me, but that's at a push. And the way that Arteta sets them up tactically is just much more defensive setup than Pep Guardiola does. It's not criticism. There's more than one way to win a football match.
Yeah, 1-0 to the Arsenal. Perhaps on defence, Endino, one you'd expect Arsenal to win. Now let's move on to midfield.
And we'll start with Arsenal again. Midfield for me is where it gets really, really interesting, because this is where I think that Arsenal have got to slightly adapt as the second half of the season goes on in midfield and attack.
What are they doing now? What do they need to do?
What they're doing now is that Zubimendi is the base of the midfield, and that Declan Rice, they've had injuries, so he has played elsewhere, but Declan Rice in here and Martin Ødegaard in here, or Eberechi Eze in there, because when Ødegaard was injured as well. So you've got your runner, your ball player, and then your passer, your tempo man, and the guy who mops up. So nothing wrong with that, nothing wrong with it at all. However, Arsenal do become predictable in those areas. And as I think I've said this before on Tactics Exposed, you can still predict something is going to happen and then not be able to deal with it afterwards.
Aston Villa recently.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And Arsenal are fantastically good at what they do, and it is almost like lift and repeat, rinse and repeat.
Until someone stops us.
Exactly. They keep doing it, keep doing it, keep doing it. But the midfield adaptation is where later adaptation is the right way to say that word, isn't it?
I understand.
Is where they need to get better in games. And I think that, you know, where Arteta is a little bit more rigid. We talked about Unai Emery for a moment there. He's not frightened in game to change things up. Right. And I do really think there are going to be games this year where Zubimendi is the man who gets substituted, and that becomes Declan Rice, and then you're going to play games with Eze and Ødegaard, because if you can then have that double threat on the ball in those areas. And look, Declan Rice is a great runner, so he'll carry the ball and he'll dart into those areas there and drive into those spaces. But what happens when someone like Declan Rice does that is he runs with the ball, and then these four defenders will all kind of converge around that area, right? And block off those spaces. And of course, this guy here, be it Gyökeres, Jesus, Havertz, Marino, whoever it is, they're going to be marked like this. And all of a sudden, you end up with these areas there. And what I think that Arsenal have struggled to do at times is release that pass through the lines from midfield when that ball is on. Whether that's Declan Rice, not just blaming Declan Rice, Ødegaard, Eze, whoever it is, Arsenal are carrying the ball right up to the edge of the area, because that's what Arteta wants them to do. He wants them to force teams back into their own area, and we see Arsenal score cutback goals and cutback on their left foot goals, and that's a tactic. But the variation is what I'm talking about in a title race. Where they're going to have to get better is judging when a team comes out, and they did this, to be fair, brilliantly in the North London derby. Is when a team comes out to engage them, that's when it's got to go in behind. It's got to be knocked in there to go in behind. And Everton away, Everton went man for man against Arsenal, and Arsenal had the opportunity quite a lot to get the ball in behind and cross it across the face of goal, and they didn't do it anywhere near enough, and that is one of the reasons Gyökeres is struggling.
To give them the benefit of the doubt, I know you're talking about Gyökeres there, but on the games we've had Marino, he's played brilliantly up front, not pacey at all.
No.
Is it more of an issue that, well, they haven't necessarily had the man running in behind? No, that's what Gyökeres is supposed to be doing, and has been doing, to be fair. Like, is it as much of that, or is it a tactical choice?
I think it's rinse and repeat. It's that they've been doing this for years. You know, let's look back. How long since Ødegaard had a striker that ran in behind for him in those areas? Aubameyang? Yeah. You know, like back as far as that. I mean, all right, you know, the Lacazettes and Aubameyang feels like a lifetime ago for Arsenal, but they haven't had that. They've had Havertz, who comes over into this area and joins that three, or then goes into that area and joins that three, or drops in here and comes and links midfield so that the midfielders can go running beyond the striker. They haven't had that guy leading the line and making those runs. So they're not used to him yet, but essentially, there's a lot of ball carrying going on with Arsenal, and what teams do is they retreat. So as soon as Arsenal get it, everybody backpedals and goes right back to the edge of their box, and so gets into that position there straight away. You know, if you're a defensive manager and against Arsenal and you see that, you think, we've got a chance here.
Quite.
Doesn't mean Arsenal aren't going to score, because they've got brilliant players who are going to cross the ball into different areas. But that's where, for me, understanding the tempo of the game and then perhaps making the change that Declan Rice, maybe it's Declan Rice who comes off, heaven forbid.
Whoa,
you know,
blasphemy,
but honestly, in their last game when Declan Rice played at right back, you've got a situation actually where he was able to be a willing runner, and then you've got two other ball players in there as well. So look, it's more than one way to win a football match, as I say. It's just an adaptation thing for Arsenal, where I think that the midfield at times are hanging onto the ball a little bit too long, and that 3-3 setup that they have either side is crowding things out.
Makes perfect sense, Dino, although I am very much looking forward to the comments on this video already, because you are not allowed to suggest that Declan Rice is anything other than a Ballon d'Or winning midfielder. Ball player, ball runner, goal scorer.
First name on any team sheet. First name on any team sheet.
Leave it out. Anyway, talk to me about Man City's midfield.
Yeah, it's been amazing, and it's been fantastic to watch. But they do have issues as well. You know, they do have a. Do you play Tierney Reinders? Do you play Jeremy Doku? You know, I mean, that's not a bad problem to have, is it? Really?
Slightly different positions.
Yeah, but they're using them in a very similar way, because what Pep's doing, as I said, let's push these fullbacks right on, so they're creating a five, you know, and then you've got Nico Gonzalez creating that three at the back. So then, if that is Doku playing off Haaland, then he's starting wide and going in, or he's switching with Nico O'Reilly, Rayan Aït-Nouri, who's at AFCON at the moment, but will be back for the second half of the season. So they've got that option. And what Pep's doing very, very cleverly with his midfielders is creating this sort of vortex around Haaland, which means that, you know, Haaland is occupying two centre-backs himself a lot of the time. So if you get Foden and Doku, or Foden and Cherki in those areas there, and then you're pushing your fullbacks on either side, as I say, pushing the midfielders on, be that Reinders and Silva or whatever it is.
I remember a game against Wolves, Dino, sorry to interrupt, where you did, it was really interesting, the first time I ever heard you talk about the sixth man run when City played away at Wolves, and it was Reinders who scored in that game, I think, and how the six-man run is effectively, we're used to seeing teams attack in a five, but City even had one more in from the midfield.
Yeah, absolutely. But the last few weeks, a lot of teams have become wise to that. So they're man marking the midfield players. So you don't man mark. Like Foden will drift and go wherever. So what teams have done is they'll just go in man for man there, and they'll bring that in there, okay, as their two options. So that's what teams are doing in a defensive shape against Man City. You'll notice this one is free, but if that's possession on that side, teams will try and move that across. But that
so
brings
the defenders
me on.
will shift.
Exactly, defenders will all shift across. But that brings me on to the Man City tactic. So what they'll want to do is drag these extra players into these areas, and then you drag somebody across, and then all of a sudden you drag teams across, and then you've got this. So that's what Pep's creating with his midfielders, because they're midfield runners who are moving into an area. As I said, we've got that front six there. And then, look, all of a sudden you've got 3v2 on the other side. So that's where the Nico is coming back in there and in there. And then the other thing that Haaland has been doing is he will now, I mean, the creating of space that Haaland is making at the moment for other people is to drag in there to open up these areas in here for that pass to go through. So Pep's using his midfielders as decoy runners. He's using them as overload players. So the difference with Arsenal, where it's ball carrying and then it's ball at feet, Pep wants it to be moved quickly between those areas and much more direct. So they're not, as Arsenal are doing, playing sort of keep ball in and around the penalty area and moving the ball in these areas here, they'll have somebody run there, they'll have somebody run there. They'll have Haaland take that player away and they'll have somebody run through there. So they're runners, and that's the difference that he's made in this midfield. They sat at the Club World Cup last year, this has been well documented, and said the setup and the makeup of the squad is wrong for what the Premier League is. He wanted direct attackers, much more fast attacks. They've scored more fast and direct attacks this season than in any other under Pep Guardiola already, and we're only halfway through the season. So expect that from the midfield this year and the second half of the season. I don't think that's going to change. And as I said, they've got that man, Bernardo Silva, who when everyone else is running in all different directions, I'll come in and make sure Nico is there. Foden drops in to go in the ball. Bernardo makes the space for somebody else. So fantastic stuff.
And it's fair to say as well, Dino, that City, more so certainly than Arsenal, are progressing the ball in a bit more of a mixed fashion. They will carry it, but they will also knock it forward at times.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the Pep Guardiola style change has meant that it's more erratic, but often these Premier League players revel in that type of chaos because they're good footballers.
Yeah, I've never seen a team revel in chaos as much as Bayer Leverkusen in that unbeaten season that they had. Right, rank then, Dino. Midfield, Arsenal are winning 1-0 at the moment based on the defence. Who gets the midfield?
I think it's all square in midfield because I think that the organisation and structure goes to Arsenal, but then the attacking endeavour goes to Manchester City. So I think, all square in midfield.
Right, nice one, Dino. Arsenal just edging it at the moment, sort of 1.5 to half a point, I think. You've ruined the scoring system a little bit, if I'm honest. Right, talk to me then, Dino, about attack now. And we've covered Arsenal in particular lots of times on Tactics Exposed and Team Talk this season. We've done a few on Manchester City as well. I find Man City to be intriguing, really coming into their own at the moment. But just start by laying out for me, what are Arsenal doing? What should they be doing better? Obviously, Gyökeres comes in the summer, hasn't quite hit those heights.
Yeah, so again, I talk about it a lot, but that sort of wheel of chaos that they use out wide, both sides, two sets of three, full back, left eight, and an attacker, and a winger or an attacker there. That's how they want to play. What I think they've got a slight issue with Arsenal at the moment is that it's gone back to almost 18 months ago where teams are doing a very good job at doubling up on Bukayo Saka.
Right.
And so he's their star man, their star boy, but his return this season has not been as good as Phil Foden's. Right? Okay, so, I always joke with, there's quite a few Arsenal fans who I've always said, that I believe Foden's better than Saka, but that's just because I like winding them up. I don't actually believe that. I think they're very, very different players, but you wouldn't turn either of them down, would you?
Foden on his day better than Saka on his day.
Yeah, I don't know.
Sorry,
we could be here. We could be here all day
fans.
debating it, I think. But
get in the comments.
The key thing is that at the moment, because of this striker issue, Arsenal are finding that what teams will do against them is either drop a midfielder back into here or shuffle a defender over because they're comfortable with one centre-back picking up the striker there, okay? And, and obviously they'll come in the other side, which straight away they're making Saka 2v1. And where Arsenal's injury problems at right back have meant he's played with Timber, he's played with White, he's played with Rice, and Arsenal aren't getting enough return out of Bukayo Saka's brilliance. And that's not Saka's fault. They need to find a way to get him the ball in space. Remember a couple of years ago we did that show where the ball comes into this area here, up the line, and then Saka's movement is to take the ball on the run in there. Yep. Teams are stopping that happening now.
Is it the same as what's happening to Mo Salah at Liverpool this season?
Very much so. Very, very much so. And teams are just doing that and blocking that off there so that Saka, if he then goes in here to receive the ball, look at that. Yeah. It's straight away. All straight away crowded around the ball. So they've got to find a way to give Saka that space. And for me, that is where, and look, Mourinho's been brilliant. Yep. That's where they're missing Kai Havertz. And that's where the second half of the season, Kai Havertz coming back in is going to be huge for this title race. I genuinely believe Kai Havertz's tactical ability and awareness, he will come in. And look, again, I hate to be critical of Mourinho because he's had that purple patch and done really, really well.
He was great.
But but Havertz is a more natural attacking player. So when the ball's in midfield, Mourinho will come in and provide that extra one in here to get the ball to Saka. great. But in attacking areas, Havertz's unselfish runs, where he will read where the ball's going to go, he'll think, OK, right, Odegaard's going to pick the ball up in here. He'll come into here, Havertz, not because he wants the ball, because he wants to then take that defender away there, which means all of a sudden that's on, and then you've got Saka 1v1. Now, the next bit is, can Saka then get the ball across the face of goal? Can he cut back? Of course he can. That's what he does to his best. So at the moment, Arsenal are getting, I would say, like 2/3 of Bukayo Saka, and they need 3/3 for them to really go and seal the title. That brings us on to Gyökeres, yes?
Yeah, I was also going to say, again, I imagine, Dino, that the lack of balance, i.e. that they haven't got a player anywhere near as good as Bukayo Saka on the left-hand side, that's obviously a problem for him as well. It makes it easier for teams to double up.
It does make it easier for teams to double up, but I'm a bit confused as to how they've been using Eberechi Eze over the last few weeks. You know, he had a very, very strong patch at the end of October into November, and you know the goals against Tottenham, the hat-trick in the North London derby, and you know, and it's almost like players are going to have peaks and troughs throughout the season, but Arsenal have got an amazing amount of flexibility in their attack, because if you have Eze on this side, he'll start there, but predominantly he's going to go there. Nominally, he's playing left wing, which means you've got Calafiori to go up the outside. And then, obviously, if you play Martinelli, then he's going to play much more as a winger. Calafiori will come and occupy these areas, but then you've got Declan Rice making your underlap runs through there. But throughout all this, there's this big question mark around Gyökeres. They spent 60, 70 million pounds on this guy. Couple of goals in open play is not enough so far. But I don't think, as I said before, I don't think it's necessarily his fault. Arsenal need to be more direct, more attacking, and take more risks. And it sounds strange because they are top of the league and they are the team there to be shot at, or favourites for the Premier League anyway. And yet they're not quite taking as many risks in those attacking areas. And they've got a striker who thrives on the direct 20-yard pass to get on the end of a 10-yard run. And they need to do that much more often. And there was a League Cup game earlier in the year where it was actually Ethan Nwaneri who played this ball round the corner when they were in this position here, Arsenal, and the ball gets played into him and he didn't look, Nwaneri, he just played it round the corner and Gyökeres went through and in. And it was almost like, whoa, that's the one. And he keeps making these runs, keeps getting in the penalty area. They've got to feed those passes.
Absolutely, Dino. Look, don't forget, with Betfair's Safe Sub, your bet is not over yet. It rolls on to the player coming on. So if Gyökeres has started, he's just not hitting the back of the net, but you have backed him to score. He gets hauled off. Mikel Merino comes on in his place and nods one in at the back post while you still get paid out. Right, Dino, let's move on then. Just tell me what Manchester City are doing, then we can finally call it who, on a tactical basis, is going to win the Premier League in your opinion. So talk to me about City.
Yeah, well, City's attack obviously centres around that one man, Erling Haaland. And, you know, where, you know, teams will come in and put that block in there, you can see that triangle I've created straight away. He's the focal point of the attack. And, you know, everyone keeps talking about the number of the lack of touches. You know,
who cares?
Exactly. It's so frustrating listening to a commentary team go, oh, he's only touched the ball 7 times in this half. Do you know what, though? Those two centre-backs have had the worst half of their lives and he's only had 7 touches because he's just dragging players all over the place. You cannot switch off. He's been given the captain's armband in some games this season and he has taken that responsibility on enormously, and what he does is he just disrupts backlines, you know, because straight away, like if lots of teams will play a back 5, okay, and Haaland will run in there, and look, everyone will go, oh, he's offside, of course he's offside. Yeah, but you create a bit of indecision, so he'll then drop just slightly. I'm leaving him off, right? That then means this player here can break that line and still be onside, and he does it all the time, and he pushes teams back right into the area, right onto the edge, and then look, Phil Foden arrives, and Phil Foden's goal return, as mentioned before, has been off the chart. So, look, it seems futile just to talk about how good Erling Haaland is.
But also not, because I think what we're talking about here, what we just spoke about with Gyökeres, I know it's an if, buts and maybes. If Haaland's up front for Arsenal, they steamroll the title.
Yeah, absolutely. They absolutely win it from there with Haaland in the team, and it's not just because they would probably feed the ball in the box more often than they do for Gyökeres Arsenal, is because it's that occupation of centre-backs. And what you're looking for is an overload, and you're looking for an extra body. So when City do go and push those 6 players in attack, like straight away you're thinking, oh, we've got to bring another man back. We've got to bring another man back. And then they end up in this sort of traffic jam round the edge of the box, and previously, and where in the games where City have struggled, it's because they don't cross it as often, right?
Quite.
They really don't cross. They can end up City in sort of that shape there, right, where they've got the two full-backs, the 4 attackers, the midfielders, and often City they won't cross it and they recycle the ball back round into this position here. And we've talked about that sort of U shape of hell, or the horror horseshoe that Manchester City can get themselves in, because if a team compacts this area, they go round it. So they have had some success from crosses. I would say that they need to cross it more, and if they're going to face teams this season who do drop off and get that shape right, we've got another huge Arsenal versus Man City game to come. We've got to get the monkey off their back against Spurs at the Tottenham Stadium, which would be really hard, won't it, for Manchester City to do after that defeat earlier in the season. But no, I do think they need to cross it more, because one thing that what Arsenal will do in attack very, very well is it's relentless. It's wave after wave of attack, and often what City allow you, because they want some controlled possession when they get into this area, they allow you to reset your shape. And so they'll recycle the ball back around, which means the defence can set and shuffle. Whereas if you start loading crosses into the box to this man Haaland, you're going to end up with your centre-backs dropping right in, course people drop in here, then the knockdowns come for those second shots.
Ryan Cherki's winner at Nottingham Forest the other week, exactly that was it.
That.
Long ball to the back, it knocks down. It was so crowded and packed, and then you smash it.
Yeah, and that's a game where you would expect them not to cross the ball as much against a dominant Nottingham Forest team in the air, against a Sean Dyche team, centre-backs who are going to win the ball a lot. But he's that much of a threat that you can hang those crosses into the box. So, yeah, I do think that City have got a lot better at that. But, the sort of, they're not one-dimensional in attack at all, City. That would be ridiculous to say. But at times you just think, stick it on Haaland's head and throw it in there, and feed the goat and he'll score.
Right, tell me then, Dino, sounds a little bit obvious. Who wins the attack for you then out of Man City and Arsenal?
Well, Man City do, but I do feel like Arsenal have a higher ceiling, in their attack. They're not to say that they'll be better than Man City's, but Arsenal have got more improvement. At the moment, City are the best attacking team in the league.
Well, awkwardly, Dino, that makes it 1.5 all, I think, at the end of that. So, from a tactical perspective, based on what you've said there, which of those two overall systems is most sustainable, and ultimately, in your opinion, from a tactical perspective, who's going to win the Premier League if it's not Aston Villa?
I think from a tactical perspective, Arsenal still just about have the edge, and that's because they've stuck to Arteta's principles for the last 3 to 4 years. So when changes inevitably happen in the second half of the season, injuries, there's an international break, there'll be European changes as well, then I think the Arsenal players are better drilled at coming in. So if you have like I said, when Declan Rice goes to play at right back, he knows exactly what's expected of the right back position because he's seen it drilled. He might not have played it, but he's seen it drilled over the year. Pep's done quite a revolution in his tactics in the last 6 months, and I just don't see it as being as sustainable as Arsenal's. Arsenal concede less goals, therefore have to score less, so it doesn't particularly matter that their attack's not as good as Man City's. I still think it's Arsenal's title to lose.
There we go then. Dean Scoggins. From a tactical perspective, Arsenal are going to edge Manchester City to the Premier League title. Look, thank you very much for watching this video. Let us know what you think of anything that Dino or I have had to say in the comments. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel. And just a quick one from Dean and I. Happy New Year to all of you. Thanks very much for your support and sticking with Tactics Exposed and Team Talk throughout 2025. It's been an absolute barnstormer for me and Dean. We've had a brilliant time doing it, but we couldn't have done it without your support. So stick with us because we'll be back better than ever in 2026.